The Department of Homeland Security announced on Friday that ICE, state and local law enforcement partners had launched an initiative to protect vulnerable children who they say had been placed with unvetted sponsors under the previous administration. Joining us to discuss is Andrew Arthur, fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies and a former immigration judge. Good to have you with us today, Andrew.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie.
Now, Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin says there are 450,000 children who entered the U.S. unaccompanied under the Biden administration. She says many of them were allowed to be placed with sponsors who were smugglers and sex traffickers. How big is this problem in your estimation?
Problem is huge, Stephanie, and the bigger issue is we don't know how big it is. Under the Trump administration, the Department of Health and Human Services, who is responsible for placing these children, spent about 100 days on average vetting sponsors before they were released to those kids. Under the Biden administration, that dropped to less than 30 days. A lot of corners were cut. There were a number of Inspector General reports that came out, a number of congressional hearings that discussed the manner in which the Biden administration had lowered the standards for sponsor vetting before children were released. And hundreds of thousands of those children ended up becoming lost. We couldn't find them after the fact. They didn't show up in immigration court. The Biden administration didn't actually even place most of them in immigration court, which would have given us an opportunity to keep track of them. So, the Trump administration inherited this huge mess and is attempting now to address it by using local and state partners to help find those children, just to identify them and make sure they're safe.
And how did children end up being placed with unvetted sponsors, or what did that vetting process look like under the Biden administration?
So the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Refugee Resettlement was given the authority to shelter those children and place them with sponsors back in 2002. When the Department of Homeland Security was stood up, but there really wasn't a lot of discussion about, whether they should do this or how they would do it. And unfortunately, the law doesn't really have a whole lot of follow-up after the fact, after those children are sheltered and then placed with sponsors to find them. It's the biggest defect in the system. And it's been a defect that's been in the system since 2002 and certainly since the law was amended in 2008. And so, a number of ad hoc processes were created, subsequent to try to, keep track of those kids. But the biggest issue was that, under the first Trump administration, they would fingerprint all the adults in the house. If the sponsors were here illegally, and probably a majority of them were, they would be placed into removal proceedings so we could keep track of them. All of those safeguards that were put into the system under Trump were largely eliminated under the Biden administration. Back in 2020, when President Biden, or when candidate Biden was running for president, he excoriated Donald Trump on the campaign trail for, the fact that these children were being used as, tools and weapons to draw out the sponsors. The sponsors are the ones who paid the smugglers to bring these kids to the United States. They should be in proceedings. We should know a lot about them. And the United States government should never leave a child with someone that they aren't 100% sure is fit. But if you take a look at the DHS press release, you'll see that one of the sponsors of those children was subsequently convicted for statutory rape and trafficking unrelated to the child that they sponsored. But with respect to the child they sponsored, that child was actually pregnant by the sponsor. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with. I think we're going to find a whole lot more out as this initiative rolls around. Only about 24,400 of these children out of 450,000 have been located thus far. And the stories are already harrowing that are coming out about these kids.
Yes, that does sound harrowing already. The department says the primary focus of this initiative is to conduct welfare checks on these children to ensure that they're safe and not being exploited. What kind of actions do you expect that to entail?
And, this is really the critical part of this. The Department of Homeland Security has entered into what are called 287G agreements. Those are agreements with state and local law enforcement to, assist in immigration processing, identifying people here illegally, various other things. And there's been a lot of controversy in certain places surrounding that program. But under this initiative, the UAC Safety Initiative, those state and local partners are being sent out to the last known address for these kids. They're going to do, door knocks. They're going to, ask to talk to the kids, ask to talk to the sponsors to verify that those children are in a safe situation. If they're not, they're going to take them away. And, this is the sort of thing that should have been going on throughout the Biden administration. It didn't. Kudos to the Trump administration. And kudos to all those state and local cops who are doing this. This is, in addition to keeping the rest of us safe in our community. So, but it's a very absolutely crucial step that they take. Unfortunately, they're cleaning up a rather major mess.
In that sense, what else, if anything, do you think is needed to ensure these children's safety?
I think that at a minimum, we need to identify them, find out where they are. If they don't have immigration status, and this is going to be counterintuitive, Stephanie, they need to be put into removal proceedings. I was an immigration judge and I had jurisdiction over, some children's cases. If a kid was in my court, I could ask that kid how they're doing, whether they're in school, whether they need anything, whether everything is okay. But, absent that, you're not really going to have a United States government official who has any contact with these children whatsoever. We know very little about them before they got here. And again, because of what the corners that the Biden administration cut, we don't really know a whole lot about the sponsors. So, when you're talking about 450,000 children, which is the number that we're talking about, this is a huge undertaking, but it's absolutely crucial.
And with your expertise and experience, it's great to have your insights into this very important matter. Andrew Arthur, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie.